Hi there. George R. R. Martin just made a far reaching update to his blog in which he talked about a lot of different things going on in the news and variety of sci fi convention things. Also, updates for House of the Dragon, which were very interesting. And even what I think is the most specific update we've gotten about the Winds of Winter in a while in terms of, well, specifically, what are you struggling with that it's taking so long? It was only two sentences, but just hearing him say, this is specifically what the chapters that were giving me a lot of trouble were, was interesting. I don't think we've heard him talking about a specific thing he was working through in like 3 years. Like occasionally he'll go, right now I was just working on a chapter set in the Riverlands or something. I vaguely remember that from 3 years ago. He actually said something specific for the first time in on the scale of years. But the bigger info was for House of the Dragon. Well, to start with, from near the beginning of this, in terms of the news that'll hit us first, Martin confirmed that he will be going to San Diego Comic-Con this year. That with the pandemic winding down to certain levels, he will be going to that, which is important because they're going to have their giant panel to promote House of the Dragon. He didn't talk about that specifically, but he will be there for their big launch panel. Remember, HBO wanted to hold its own Game of Thrones, self-run convention, more of an upfront that people can go to with tickets, like DC Fandom, Star Wars Celebration type thing in Las Vegas back in February, and they had to cancel that due to the Omicron spike with COVID, which puts so much more pressure on San Diego Comic-Con. This will be the launch panel for this show. A lot of these are relatively unknown actors. People don't know who Emma Darcy is, or the younger actors like Millie Alcock. I mean, some of them are kind of well known. People kind of know who Olivia Cooke and Emily Carey are, but a wide range of other people aren't really that well known. I mean, of course, there's Matt Smith, but he talks about this in the blog update that some of these actors are relative unknowns. And the big introduction for a lot of people will be the big promotional event at San Diego Comic-Con, and Martin will be there. On top of that, I can't remember the last time Martin went to San Diego Comic-Con off the top of my head. Because remember when he went to Comic-Con panels in early Game of Thrones seasons? And then, I'm doing this off the top of my head, like season 5 onwards, we could tell that he was conspicuously not going to their promotional events anymore. That he wasn't at Comic-Con to season 5 to field questions about, I don't know, why did the Sansa rape happen? What the hell is this? What are you doing to Dorne and to Stannis? And for people who are, it's so weird that I can't criticize people for not paying attention because news media wasn't calling attention to it. That if you were upset that, oh man, Benioff and Weiss ducked out of season 8, the final season 8 Comic-Con panel, they ducked out of season 5's. Well, the Comic-Con is after the finale, that it was just this utter shock to us that for 4 years these had been the scrappy young fantasy show that it was a privilege for them to be at Comic-Con. And then they did this really controversial thing, and they didn't come to the Comic-Con panel. It was a slap in the face. And the second slap in the face was that the news media didn't even call them on it. They just shrugged and moved on, and you cannot be angry about that just season 8. All the shenanigans they were up to. I mean, we noticed that Martin wasn't coming to their Comic-Cons, that he wasn't in their inside the episode, behind the scenes things anymore. And when pressed, he politely say, they've changed so much, what could I say about it? I don't know what they're doing with the story. Which is a backhanded way of saying they're not following my outline. That how can you say this broadly followed Martin's outline when he would say, they've changed so much I can't even, be in the writer's room. Just, I wouldn't know where to start. He says this is his polite way of dancing around. I think he has an NDA or something that he can't call this out. And there's still a few diehards online who insist season 8 was amazing. And there's not many of them. Not even like Watchers on the Wall wouldn't do this. These are the real deep corners of the internet that it's disproportionate to how many of them there are. There aren't many of them. But if you're a fanatic, they'd have to be fanatics if they still love this. They've come to identify with Benioff and Weiss so much, and that the show's success is their success. They pretty much spend all day online, running around social media and message boards, yelling at people, admit that it was the best show ever and they're responsible for it, that even season 8 was amazing. That this isn't about the show, this is about you. That you have some need for that approval. You've come to vicariously identify with the success of Benioff and Weiss so much that you need to go online and yell at people and into agreeing with you. And again, it's this hyper minority. They're not internet trolls. That's what scares me, that the trolls who believe in nothing and do this to screw with people. I get that. These are true believers. And I'm not talking about watchers on the wall. It's no one who has a YouTube channel. I'm talking the real lunatic fringe. And thank God if you guys have never encountered them, because I'm a prominent news channel, I unfortunately run into them a lot. I keep having to tell myself, this is like an obscure person. But it's still upsetting to hear people just mouthing platitudes about how great everything was when Martin stopped coming to their Comic-Con panels, openly said they weren't following his outline to the point he couldn't write a script if he wanted to for them because it's so alien to him. He's not in their behind-the-scenes things. He is removed from this. I think he went to the Season 4 Comic-Con panel, and just the last time he was at a promotional event, he would politely come to some of their Emmy Awards. He didn't come to the last one. When was the last time you can really remember Martin being at a San Diego Comic-Con promoting a new season of a show set in Westeros? I can't easily remember. It's been a long time. He said he's not going to Worldcon, which is in Chicago this year, for a variety of reasons. I think it's because they're upset about the sad puppies thing or whatever, that ongoing infighting with Worldcon. That's a separate issue, whatever. I'm more concerned about that he's coming to San Diego Comic-Con, and yeah, he'll be there. He didn't directly say this, but he's coming to San Diego Comic-Con, and this year they're having the big promotional event for House of the Dragon. That Comic-Con is the last week of July, and House of the Dragon is the last week of August. So this is a month before that. There's a chance this is when, for all we know, we may have seen all the teasers they're going to put out. Like, the next video could be the full trailer at Comic-Con. Some people think, I hope we get other promo videos. There's a chance that they'll be unveiling all sorts of video content and stuff for this. It'll be a huge event. I'm just really happy that he'll be there to help launch this, and that to show his stamp of approval by coming in person. That's with Comic-Con. As for House of the Dragon itself, by the way, I'm not reading off what he posted verbatim because anyone could do that and you could follow the link to it. These are my views on it. He said that he has seen 9 out of 10 rough cuts. That there's only one more episode out of 10 that needs a rough cut delivered. They're pretty much nearly done. And he did point out, well, they're rough cuts. They don't have any special effects, visual effects for dragon things in them. We need to add in all the visual effects now. That's, post. By the way, in a separate interview, Ryan Condal in a podcast talked about there's stages of putting visual effects in. Like when you see, they've shown this behind the scenes where the wireframe dragon becomes like a transparent dragon to a loosely animated dragon. There's stages of detail as they upgrade the animation on the dragons. And he said, I've been seeing like mid-stage animations of these things, and it's really exciting to watch the previs videos. They've shown these of loosely animated dragons, and it helps you immerse in it more. So Condal said just how amazing it is to actually see when it's all put together for some of the early stuff. But they still have a lot of VFX work to do. But Martin has said that 9 out of 10 rough cuts are done. He's seen them and he really likes them. And as I said before, he doesn't need to say that he could be silent. He was silent in the late seasons of Game of Thrones. Silent about The Long Night. Instead, he's talking about, I really like what they're doing. I'm having close discussions with them. That the way they've explained is he didn't write a specific script, but that's not as important as he's brainstorming with them a lot. They're frequently texting back and forth. That he goes to the bigger meetings for outline, mostly at the beginning when they were hashing it out. But they send messages back and forth. It really feels collaborative and like they're engaged with him. That he is on board. This isn't when he was a glorified. We later found out they were pretty much ignoring George R. R. Martin since season 1. Whenever they had something that Benioff and Weiss wanted to do, they just do it without consulting him. And we just assumed he was in on it. It was so weird how naive we were. We shouldn't have been. It just they they did a really good job of covering this up and making it look like it was all happy behind the scenes. I mean, objectively, we have later interviews saying Martin saying they were ignoring me since the pilot. And yeah, I'd write a script, but they had veto power, and I'd bring up discussions with them. They would just go over my head all the time. It really wasn't an equal partnership. But again, people want to believe the fantasy that it was the most successful show and Martin approved of everything when he increasingly said he was not in the loop with them. He is for House of the Dragon. So I am okay with that. And he's enjoyed everything. He's working with them. A lot of the post is him in the blog post talking about how great everything's been working with everyone. Separate point now, and this is very interesting. This is really solid information we're getting for the first time. Martin said that House of the Dragon as a TV show couldn't do what the book did, Fire and Blood, where sometimes it presented 3 alternate versions of what happened. Because it's an in-universe history book, and in his main books, he likes doing what Faulkner did, where there's different POVs, different point of view characters who had different interpretations of things. So, like, Catelyn might not have the same interpretation of something as Tyrion. Jon Snow or Daenerys have very different views on things. Like, it's so weird by the 5th book when Tyrion comes to the Daenerys region, and when he comes to Slaver's Bay, which up until this point has only been narrated from Daenerys' perspective, and like people she trusted, like Brown Ben Plum, who's a mercenary commander, he looks at him because he's a lot shrewder. He goes, he's playing her. That he can tell he has this persona of jovial niceness, and he can tell people that she had one perspective on, he has a different perspective on. You can't do that in a history book. So the idea he came up with to maintain an element of that, and I really like it, and it was very ingenious, because I'm a history major, we're always sorting out sources. Idea he came up with is there are rival sources describing the same event. This happens all the time in real-life history. That there's a pro-Rhaenyra historian, Munkin, and there's a pro-Aegon II historian, Septon Eustace. And then there's the court fool, this lascivious dwarf named Mushroom, who writes ribald, scandalous, and physically impossible, salacious stories about what happened. But he was there, and once in a while he says something that might be true, or have an element of truth to it, and he's just exaggerating it. And he does point out, the historian, the in-universe historian Gildane, sorting through these 3 things, says, Mushroom, I'm mentioning, don't believe most of it, but once in a while he hits on an interesting idea that I can't dismiss out of hand. So, case in point, did Rhaenyra break up with Criston Cole, or did Criston Cole break up with Rhaenyra? Munkin gives one version, Eustace gives a different version. Martin pretty much confirmed in this blog post that they're going to objectively present one version of events. Now, I don't mean to say they're picking Munkin's version for everything, or Eustace's version for everything. And no sane person would use Mushroom's version for the entire dance. What I'm saying is, like, maybe for one thing they'll go with the Munkin version, for a different thing they'll go with the Eustace version. Another possibility is they're picking a middle path, that what we'll see in the TV show is somewhere between what Munkin and Eustace said. Now, I'm going to make a video where I give a checklist of Season 1. These are the points where these aren't objective facts, where we don't know what happened behind closed doors. Case in point, who broke up with who between Rhaenyra and Criston? Did Daemon actually manage to sleep with Rhaenyra at some point? That kind of thing. Now, the thing is, I'm not going to tell you this whole thing, but I have heard rumors of the one distinct version of events that they are going to objectively present as the Criston and Rhaenyra breakup. I'm not going to give details about which version they use or inventions or whatever, just I've heard it actually happens on camera. That isn't how I would do it. The way I would do it is, skip ahead and have secondhand other characters say, I heard that Rhaenyra broke up with Criston, and another person counter, but I heard that Criston broke up with her. The back and forth of here two other characters saying it. Imagine like Game of Thrones, when people keep describing the Mad King without having flashbacks, that like Ned thinks he knows what happened, but then Jaime, who was there, knows what really happened with the Mad King and the wildfire plot. But have people describing this historical thing that happened off camera, that I hear she broke up with him, no, he broke up with her, between two other characters. That's how I would do it to maintain the ambiguity. They're not doing that. They're actually going to present one version on camera. And I do sympathize that it is impossible to present truly Rashomon style, where it's famous Kurosawa movie where it showed 3 different versions of events. You've seen a lot of shows and cartoons ripping off that format. It's a good idea of showing different POVs. I would never have done the very literal thing, which would have been to show like alternate takes. Like, I'm trying to describe this verbally, on camera, have a scene where Millie Alcock and is with Kristen Cole, and show her breaking up with him as like a flashback on camera, and then go, no, that's not what really happened, and then show the actors physically acting out the different alternate version where instead of her breaking up with him, he breaks up with her. Imagine how complicated that would be to show 3 versions of a single scene as 3 different contradicting flashbacks. That is needlessly complicated, and it would simply eat up a lot of time. You can't do that. The way I would do it is leaving it off screen and have different people describe it, but I sympathize that they said, and Martin says, no sane person would have done 3 different versions of certain things. They had to pick a version and stick with it. And again, not Munkin for everything or Eustace for everything. Maybe it varies from one point to the next. But things that were ambiguous in the book will be true in the show. And this will probably lead to a debate of, if it happened in the show, is that what really happened in the world of the books? And what if it's not something that Eustace or Munkin said, but something that isn't an option the books gave? Are we to take this as the true story? Because Martin did read it and read their scripts and said he generally likes it when he's seen the rough cuts. That is a question. A problem I think we really had is that in the early seasons of Game of Thrones, going into season 1, the book fan sites treated the show as a supplement to the books, in the sense that they really thought that Martin was having in-depth discussions with Benioff and Weiss, and anytime they mention a new fact that isn't in the books, it must have come directly from discussions with Martin. When really, they were just playing it fast and loose and making shit up because they liked it. I mean, remember that point in, I think it was season 5, where they had a one-off joke about, oh yes, Maegor III had all of the moneylenders' hands cut off. There is no effing Maegor III. What was that? What the hell was that? That was like season 5. In season 1, when they'd invent a detail, the book fan sites literally assumed that every single word that was on screen was something Martin must have told them or at least approved of. And looking back through like the Sansa rape, TV Dorn, all this craziness, that was where even like season 4, I remember them thinking, oh wow, Jon said that there have been 4 wildling invasions in the past 100 years. The books didn't say that. That must be this new detail Martin told them. I think they just pulled that out of their ass. That one example doesn't even contradict anything. It's just not everything in the show, like every little word, is something he approved of. I mean, George Lucas isn't a good example because he stepped away from Star Wars day-to-day production. They do, like, Filoni has discussions with him about, like, the nature of the Force and stuff, but this isn't... We really thought, I assumed this, I can't blame anyone, that everything coming in the show was an expansion of the books, was supplementing them, and not what I should have done, others even more, that this is a separate continuity, and they're trying to be close to the world of the books. If they mention something, that doesn't necessarily mean it happened in the books. And as soon as a lot of the book sites realized this isn't Martin's notes filtered through them, they gave up on the show and stopped reporting on it. Which left all the rest of us in the dark, because we needed people out there saying, the Sansa rape isn't what's in the books, this is madness. TV Dorne is insulting and racist, this is madness. But when you give up on reporting on something, it doesn't go away, it just removes that conservative ballast. That you just let them run rampant when you go, I don't feel like reporting on it, it's upsetting. So there will be considerable debate as we move forward. Does the TV show reflect what happened in the books? We would ask them politely, did Martin tell you, okay, this is what really happened? Did Martin say, even I don't know what happened? That they're picking one version and staying with it, when in the books it's deliberately ambiguous what happened. This comes up in A Song of Ice and Fire sometimes, where we're not really sure which version of events happened for certain things that, well, they abandoned this plot line, like who started the food riots? Was it Varys or was it Littlefinger? I think we will get an answer to that eventually, Martin said, but he's not telling us now. What happened to Tyrek Lannister versus whatever the TV show chose to present. So that'll be interesting moving forward, that we know definitively they're not doing the crazy option, which no one would have wanted, of 3 different versions on camera in rapid succession. Like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened back to back. They're not doing that. Nor are they... Maybe they'll do that for some things where they leave it ambiguous, but generally they're picking one version of events and at times making up their own in-between thing. And we'll have to weigh that against what the books did. Maybe it is a separate continuity from the books, which we have to cultivate and defend and hold them accountable for. You know, that, okay, that's the version you picked for your TV continuity. You have to be self-consistent with what you chose for the rest of the series. Like, it's like the fast travel stuff with Game of Thrones, that, okay, you established it takes months to get from the Wall to King's Landing, and now season 2, Littlefinger is zipping around like he has a jetpack, and people laughed when we complained, and then you get dragons zipping to the Wall from Dragonstone in a matter of hours, when they can't fly that far or that fast in the books, and the TV show generally wasn't showing him as capable of doing that either. The fast travel stuff, that it's... TV Tropes calls it Magic A is Magic A. That you need to be self-consistent. I'm an admin, one of several, on the wiki devoted to the TV shows, that, and if they try to brush aside, oh, that's just book stuff, it's, we expect you to be internally consistent, that if you say, this is something that happened, you have to stay with it. Another thing is, who killed Harwin Strong? That is a big thing that will happen in season 1. I'm actually working on videos about it, that there's a lot of plausible candidates are given. Some say Daemon did it. Some say Viserys did it. I strongly think his younger brother did it, Larry Strong. But there's multiple candidates, and we have no idea what happened. There's like 4 different versions in the books. They're going to pick one version and go with it and objectively present who killed him. Okay, then in season 3, you can't, if it's his younger brother, you have to stick with the characterization of his younger brother you've established in season 1 that he's like this. You can't suddenly switch to the books on and off again in later seasons. That I'm thinking of Cersei. Cersei in the books is a malignant narcissist. She does not truly love her children as more than extensions of herself, and she is a dangerous maniac. She is a narcissist. The TV writers fell in love with that Lena Headey, the actress, can emote motherly very well. So they'd nonsensically, anachronistically flip-flop between relatively close to the book scenes where she's this savage narcissist with the slow soap opera face where she's talking very, very caringly, but I love my children and I feel so bad about things, and this is out of character. And it's not for in-universe reasons, you're doing it to show off the actors. That there isn't a coherent TV Cersei. It's a mix of, I wanted to do this in a certain scene, randomly snapping back to book things as the plot requires, like blowing up the Great Sept, but with no consequences, because next season, I'm a loving mother again. Because they wanted to do that. That if you decide to change a TV character, it has to exist as a coherent TV character for a TV-only audience, That Cersei was so inconsistent. That if you change something, it has to be consistent to the adaptation. Even TV fans are annoyed. People, oh, you're just book fans yelling about this. Even TV-only people were annoyed at how inconsistent the writing got. Because they were all over the place, because they're just showing off actors. Well, the culmination of all this, that they have to pick one version of things, this is actually the next point, but it leads into that. That they had to pick certain versions of things, because they have to flesh out the books. Part of fleshing out the books, this is a separate point now, part of fleshing out the books is that, the Fire and Blood is an outline. It's an in-universe history book, and we have a sense of the characterization for some of them, but not that much. Even for, like, Rhaenyra and Alicent and Aegon II and Daemon, we know some of their objective actions, but what was in their heart, what was in their mind, we don't have their POV narration. I'm not even talking about, like, objective things they did, but, like, what was Aemon thinking when he burned that certain town or stuff? Well, we don't see inside their heads, even when we know what they did. Case in point, Boros Baratheon. That will come up in season 1, where we get different accounts, where when representatives from both Rhaenyra and Alicent come, it says some sources say he was embarrassed, others say he was proud to see them fighting over winning him as an ally. We don't really know what was going on in his head, and they might choose to play that ambiguously by just having him make a blank face, but some of these people, we don't know their characterization that well, because it's an outline. Inherently, the TV characters will be, I wouldn't say different, it's not like comparing what happened to A Song of Ice and Fire. They kind of need to half-invent Jake Velaryon or Helena Targaryen. We know bits about her from the outline, but not the full person. We don't really know from the source material, well, what was Helena's relationship like with Alicent as a mother and a daughter? Like, if they ever have a scene, I wouldn't say, well, this doesn't happen in the books. It was an outline. Of course it didn't happen in the books on that level of personality. So the big thing, and this is a culmination of the big thing Martin said in his update is TV Viserys, King Viserys I, Rhaenyra's father, is not like my book character, but I like him better. And I can see that. That he said he has a tragic majesty to him. That, quote, King Viserys, played by Paddy Considine, who, quote, who gives the character a tragic majesty that my book Viserys never quite achieved. And I can see that some of this evolved in Martin's mind over the course of 20 years. he never thought he'd write something about the Dance of the Dragons. Then around 2012, he was writing some sidebars for the history book, and it just flowed out of him because this master storyteller in his element. He wrote the Dance of the Dragons stuff around 2012. So, like, the first book, like, in the appendix, it goes, oh, there was this thing, the Dance of the Dragons, King Viserys' children fought it. He didn't really work out their character dynamics at all. I don't think Alicent Hightower existed as a character at the time, as a named thing in his head. It came later. He just said Rhaenyra and Aegon II were his children. They fought. I don't even think he thought of that Aegon II was her half-brother from a second marriage. None of that. Like, he gave descriptions of each of the kings to this artwork that was made in the late 90s. And he said, Viserys, this is the most characterization we got about him, said Viserys is this jolly fat man who loves and is loved by all, to show the peace and prosperity of his reign. That never quite rang true after you read The Princess and the Queen, the first prequel novella in 2013, that why would he be this jolly fat man if his first wife tragically died in childbirth to his only son at the time, who lived less than a day? And his newborn son struggling to breathe for a few hours, then dies. His beloved wife is dead. Why would this be a happy man? That it kind of works and evolves from that he was a genuinely nice, affable, friendly person who had great personal tragedies happen, but still tried to, let's all be nice and be a family and have feasts. And he's, that is a big part of being king, is getting the nobles to like you, as opposed to like Maegor or something, who's this brute. That, yeah, holding nice feasts, that he is well known for his magnanimity and his open-handedness with honors and with not just feasts, but with wealth and honors and all sorts of other things. That's part of it. So I can still see how he is a kind and nice, open-handed person while still kind of masking tragedy. And I think I can see how it evolved into that, and I don't have a problem with it. I can actually see it in the books, too, that I see the through line here that I think they ran with. That Viserys is sort of like a filed down Robert Baratheon, that he doesn't have his great qualities, he doesn't have his worst ones either. That Robert was this amazing warrior who drank and whored all the time. Viserys isn't really a fighter, but he's a loyal husband, doesn't really drink a lot. He feasts a lot. He's just partying around. He's generally a nice guy. And the thing is, they show the realistic repercussions of that spending 30 years, feasting and having barbecues with people. He got so fat that he had all sorts of health problems, and not like funny fat. I mean, like diabetes type, shortness of breath, arthritis-y type, heart problems kind of thing. That, by the end of his reign, he could barely leave his bed because he was just in very poor health. And, I'm one to talk as an American because we have, the obesity epidemic and everything, that it felt really realistic of what would happen. And that by the end of his reign, he's very ill. He is mostly bedridden. And the last thing he does is he perks up when his grandchildren are visiting. And he tells them a made-up adventure story to entertain them. The little children are like 3 and 4. Helena's children. And there's artwork of this in Fire and Blood. There's a sketch of it, and just you read so much in that he's visibly this old grandfather, he's stuck in bed, and he's just the love in his face in this artwork that and you feel the tragedy in that he's telling a story to his grandchildren. He's being nice. I think they took that and ran with it. And I also, because of the things that Paddy Considine himself has said in recent interviews, with his own mother, got diabetes and was in a great deal of pain, took her sight, a whole bunch of health problems. I'm going to talk about this separately, but Considine said, I based a lot of this on how my mother was declining in health and, really in a lot of pain, and she hid it from us because she didn't want to scare us. And that Viserys is like that he cares about his family so much he doesn't want to let on how much pain he's in. Physically, and I would guess emotionally too, and there's a tragedy to that. And I'm at an age where I'm starting to see, like, all my grandparents are dead. A lot of my friends, I don't think I have any friends who have grandparents left. That when you lose people like that who just, you're trying to get through it, and just the melancholy of that. That this was the smart choice for me. That it would have been the jolly old fat man Viserys was a relic of when the late '90s, when he didn't think there would be a dance story. And as he was writing it, like in 2012, the story evolved into Viserys is kind of this jolly fat guy, but it's also, he's increasingly tragic with all of his health problems. That was never a thing before then. But I mean, the story has evolved. I mean, in some of the earlier prints, it was something with like Viserys back when he was starting the Dunk and Egg stories. Like, I think it's something like Viserys the Second was the father and the brother, or instead of the father of someone, and he moved that around. It was something in the Blackfire background, like 30 years after the dance, and he moved that around because he realized, no, this is I want to tell a different story than that. It's not like with Tolkien. Not even Tolkien's not a good example. Tolkien kept rewriting his mythos from 1917 through 1973. You can't point to one thing that he really wasn't fully formed in his head in like 1930. Maybe a bit by 1950 it was generally solidified, but he kept tweaking things. Similarly, let's give Martin that same option. There wasn't a story about the Dance of the Dragons with this many characters when the first book mentioned it as a historical event in 1996. It did exist by 2012, and they've been refining it a bit. So I'm okay with all that. That no, Viserys isn't. He's kind more than he's jolly, and he's masking all this tragedy. I think about, like, not me. I didn't have grandparents like this, but other family friends who had grandparents who I met who were just the loveliest people you'd ever meet at like family Thanksgivings and backyard barbecues. And they lived through great personal tragedies, through World War II, through the Great Depression, and you're just, how did you survive that? And you're this fun-loving, seemingly carefree person who's just jolly and seemingly not having all these. I don't know how they did it. I really don't. And it's just that whole thing of, well, I guess is what they say to like psychopaths and narcissists, that you had a hard life, but other people have had it worse, and that you've given in to despair rather than. I'm thinking of Batman: The Killing Joke, where the Joker had one bad day and tried to prove what his descent into darkness could happen to anyone, and Batman goes, "Well, yeah, you've crippled Barbara, but Commissioner Gordon didn't just go insane. He's handling it reasonably." Maturely and well. He didn't crack and decide that morality is a joke the way you did. Maybe the problem is you. But that's fascinating. And what Martin keeps saying about the real thing that's interesting is exploring the conflict in the human heart. That why do some people experience tragedy and turn into bitter narcissists who hate the world, and other people, like people who are like Holocaust survivors, and decades later are the jolly, fun-loving grandpa at a family backyard barbecue, and like, how did you not let it affect you like that? How do you? I wouldn't know that you've had all this personal loss, and it's fascinating of how do some people react to things. I'm thinking of, in contrast to like Cersei, who it's, oh well, my mother died and my father wouldn't let me marry Prince Rhaegar. I wasn't able to marry Prince Rhaegar, and I'm distant from my father. The world is out to get me. And it's like, peasant babies are dying because of you and your petty whims. And you think you've got it worse than anyone in the world, and you've turned into this really bitter person, Cersei. And compare that to Viserys, who is, my beloved wife and my infant son died on the same day, but I'm trying to be a jolly person on the outside for the sake of my family because I love them. The contrast between that is so fascinating. So I know I'm rambling about this, but that yes, he has changed Viserys a bit. I think for the better. I think it actually fits what the story evolved into more. And some people will go, oh, well, this is better. that was people who had a need to prove that Benioff and Weiss were geniuses for A Song of Ice and Fire, and no, this improves on the book. This isn't a case of improving on a book, it's an outline. I don't even think that's comparable. You go, oh, TV Helena is so much better than Fire and Blood Helena. Yeah, probably, because Fire and Blood Helena is an outline that we kind of guess at a story for. That it doesn't have the characterization of a full book or full TV series. So yeah, anything they do in the TV show will be an expansion. It's like adapting the book that was never quite written for this. It's just an outline. And Martin always wanted to write the book version of all this. I am okay with that. I know some of it will be a little different. But there's a question of, is this outright contradicting the book character? That's going to be a whole other can of worms for this, let me tell you. Of deciding, my thing is, unless it really goes against the book, I'm not really, and even Viserys with Martin saying it is very different, but it's better, yeah, because his views on it evolved over time. I am okay with that. That as Viserys is this, the prototype, the stereotypical archetypal, I mean, wise, good king who has suffered in tragedy and is slowly dying over the course of 30 years as he gets older and just sees his family falling apart, just trying to do the right thing, and there's a tragedy to that. That a lot of Martin's stuff is that whole decline of civilization, decline like with his family, how the Brady Docks lost everything in the Great Depression. His family used to be rich, and then they were just working class. The decline, the romanticism in that sense of how things go. I gotta say, a lot of this blog post at the beginning was Martin talking about all of his friends who have died in the past 5 years. And I hate it when people shrug that off. A lot of these were well-known science fiction writers. And we go, oh, well, there's another one. He's at the point in his life where people are dying all the time. And I've realized, everyone's going to face that eventually. It's not just, oh, it's another guy I really like. These were his contemporaries, and they're dying. And these were friends of his for 30 years. And we almost get numb to it, that you realize from his perspective, these were close colleagues. And we didn't, if you're not following his career very closely, like who specifically was working on the Wild Card series, I don't think many are left from his original group of friends who, not just the Wild Cards group of friends, but all sorts of other things. Like Gardner Dozois was a real blow. He helped edit Princess and the Queen when it was a novella in 2013. He's gone. He also did Sons of the Dragon. That was the last thing he edited. He's gone too. And I just, I feel for Martin. I really worry about him. Just all these friends dying, and it's really upsetting to him. And it also upsets me when people just shrug it off and go, where's Winds of Winter? And he goes, I'm still working on it. I'm kind of upset that Gardner Dozois died. This was a man and a good person who I knew and everyone liked. And half a dozen other people in his personal circle were gone. I think he's handling it as well as anyone could, but a lot of the post was covering that. A lot of the blog post was just being upset about the school shootings and the war in Ukraine and junk. So these are tough times, but he gets through it. So he's going to Comic-Con. He's seen rough cuts he really likes. He acknowledges that they're going to objectively portray one version of events rather than doing a Rashomon effect. They physically can't do that. I kind of hope that at least some points will be left deliberately ambiguous. Like, who killed Harwin is hard to say. I'm thinking of... Remember in Breaking Bad when Walt poisons that kid? But they reveal that he did it at the end. And it's just... I wish they'd have left that ambiguous of Walt going, and the only way he gets Jesse to believe him is he goes, who do you think would be capable of poisoning a child? Me, this cancer-riddled teacher who has children of my own, or the drug cartel? Who do you think could poison a child? And then we find out it really was him, but what if they left that deliberately ambiguous by not showing us that he got the poison? And you're left wondering, maybe he was lying. I wonder if they'll do that with, like, the death of Harwin Strong. Will they show us one definitive version of events? I've heard they will. But other things like that, like, who killed Laenor? I mean, was Daemon in on it? Will they imply that he was in on it? Hard to say, but he said they're not going to just go, Munkin said this, but Eustace said this. They're not going to show alternate versions. And generally, I thought this is what they were going to do. As a TV show, they need to go with one set of things. He pointed out they're fleshing out a lot of characters. Some of them he thinks, obviously they're improvements on an outline. I don't take that as an insult. Well, yeah, it's not a full novel. And he acknowledges Viserys is particularly a lot different from my original conception. Me personally, the YouTuber here, I think that's for the better. It matches the setting better that he's, why would he be this jolly fat man when his wife just died? That doesn't make sense. So he's kind more than he's jolly, I think. I said I was going to talk about Winds of Winter, and it's a kernel of information. I'm putting this at the end here. But in many ways, it's the biggest update we've had in like 3 to 4 years of what exactly is slowing you down with this. Like, what specific chapters are you working on? And I know it's 2 sentences, but there's so much to unpack from this. That he said, quote, finally finished a clutch of Cersei chapters that were giving me fits. Now I am wrestling with Jaime and Brienne. There's a lot to unpack from that. It's not like the whole infamous Myronese knot, as he called it, when he couldn't figure out how to get everyone to Meereen and make the book a certain size, and then he said the only answer is to split books 4 and 5 in half. Half is everything in the Seven Kingdoms, and the other half is everything outside the Seven Kingdoms. So book 5 is Jon Snow at the Wall, Dany in Meereen, and Tyrion heading to Meereen, and Arya in the Free Cities. That it wasn't anything on that scale, he said. It's not a writer's block, it's just going a little slowly because I'm refining it. Every now and again he'd say, I'm working on a Riverlands chapter now, like that, but this is pretty specific that I've been really stressing over some specifically Cersei chapters are giving him trouble. I wonder what that could mean. That what was it about certain Cersei chapters in the next book that have delayed him on a scale of years? Think about that. Please tell me in the comments. Is this because her story is, I know her story is coming to a head. Is it overlapping with young Griff and the Golden Company invasion? Is it because what's happening with the Faith Militant is significantly different? Like, what exactly is going to be happening? And then throw in that, Jaime and Brienne will probably eventually overlap with Cersei. For the moment, at least, we know that Jaime and Brienne are going to meet Lady Stoneheart, zombie Catelyn Stark, in the next book from preview chapters. We know this. And that he is struggling with Jaime and Brienne chapters, which, I don't know, would involve Lady Stoneheart. Well, he's wrestling with them. I don't know, from the way he phrased it, well, now I'm wrestling with Jaime and Brienne. Does that mean they're as complicated as the Cersei ones? A major question we have to deal with. It is possible that major POV characters will die in Book 6. Not even Book 7. And were never intended to live through to Book 7. Like, the TV show changed so much. Now, I reasonably think that Jon Snow and even Daenerys will live through the final book, whether they survive it or not, but they'll be there at the beginning of Book 7. What if Book 6 is all the political stuff, then Book 7 is all the White Walker stuff, and it's very different from how the TV show handled it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure all the main Stark kids will live through into Book 7. I think there's a serious chance that Cersei could die in Book 6. I actually don't believe it myself, but I think it's distinctly possible. I mean, you never know. That if you said, oh, Dany might not survive Book 6, I dismiss that out of hand, but, Cersei might die in Book 6 if they wrap up the King's Landing stories, and yeah, that is entirely plausible. With There's a theory that the TV show just wanted to give Lena Headey stuff to do, that Cersei becoming queen is bullshit. No one would go along with that. She has no claim as the wife of the former king with no living children, and that no one raises an objection to this. Obviously, these are places her armies control, but the Tyrells would drop her in an instant. Well, they already did, but no one. What? And that the Tarleys are shown as fighting for her? There's a big theory that they basically just said, we don't want to set up young Griff and the Golden Company, so let's just give Cersei that role, which is insane. That's ridiculous. You can't just go, well, I merged it with an unrelated character. Makes as little sense as like the Sansa rape, or let's have all this other junk of just randomly merging things. And there are people out there, it's so depressing. People go, well, yeah, you need to show off these core actors. We need to condense the entire story into just these 7 people. Remember when we were mocking the idea of condensing it into 7 people back in season 1? That, they were going to turn this into a movie that was just the Night's Watch storyline. And now we have people saying it's okay to merge Sansa with Jane Poole. Well, you have to. Why not, merge Jane Poole? I'm not saying this is a good idea by any stretch, but, merge it with Asha the Wildling as someone who lived in Winterfell and could reasonably know who people are. Now, she's too old, obviously, but your instant reaction was, give it to Sophie Turner, not Sansa, but Sophie Turner, to keep the core cast having things to do. If you complain about you have no right to complain about season 8 if you didn't complain about season 5. With the Sansa stuff, that'll never happen to the core characters. Sansa is a core character. By what definition is Sansa not a core character, but Arya is? If you read the book, she has a lot of POV chapters set in King's Landing. She sees a lot of the political stuff as through her eyes. But that the blinders people had on of, well, I guess Dorne wasn't important because by definition, if Benioff and Weiss cut it, it must not have been important. And now you're complaining that they cut out so much of the White Walker stuff. Well, like the Sansa rape, I guess their book storyline must not have been important. Whether that people are going to acknowledge that Benioff and Weiss just liked changing things, this wasn't due to needs of adaptation. I don't know. But it's interesting that what if all of the political stuff gets wrapped up by the end of Book 6? That Book 6 ends with the White Walkers truly coming and the Game of Thrones is over. The petty wars of man south of the Wall are over. And it doesn't matter who's king on the Iron Throne anymore. What if Book 6 ends with Jaime strangling Cersei as the castle crumbles onto him, or to stop her from setting off the wildfire explosions? That would be amazing. It would also highlight just how different the TV show was, that it's not even Dany versus Cersei. If Cersei dies that differently, if Jaime kills her when the actors are already struggling to defend it. I don't know about everyone else, Dany, Jon Snow, the other Starks, even Tyrion, but I think there's a chance, and I think Jaime might even outlive Cersei. What's the point in killing her? As I think he'd kill her to stop her from setting off the wildfire explosion. But then, if they both died, it wouldn't, if they were in a collapsing room, it wouldn't matter if he killed her or not. He could have just let the room kill her. I think Jaime might outlive her even. Nonetheless, out of the core 7 characters, Cersei is the one who I most think might not survive the 6th book. And that will be very weird if he is struggling over the Cersei chapters so much because they are the culmination of the Cersei storylines that began in book 1. Think about that. If he is struggling over writing the exact mechanics of her death scene or the emotions of it. This will be something on the scale of the detail that needed to go into the Red Wedding chapter. Remember, he said he wrote that last for book 3 because it was so painful. And I don't know. I've been rambling a lot, but just think about that. There's so much to unpack from that. Well, what specifically have you been struggling with? What chapters have you been slowly but surely working on that it's slow work on the scale of years? Said, I have finally finished a group of Cersei chapters that I've been struggling with for a long time. There is a ton to unpack from that. The mind boggles. And when you think of that Cersei might even die in the next book, or how is she going to get out of the Faith Militant thing and dealing with the Golden Company, and just things that the TV show just snapped its fingers at and said, oh, I guess she blows up the Great Sept, which thankfully, like fans on Reddit, things like Free Folk were making memes, making fun of by season 7, that at the time people thought this was a masterstroke because they were annoyed the story was moving slowly. But in retrospect, it was just Benioff and Weiss wrapping up storylines they didn't want to keep following, so they dropped them like a dead weight. With all of that, you can't kill off all the Tyrells except for Olenna, who happened to be away. There's so many other cousins who are not in King's Landing that you could destroy the Vatican with no repercussions, that the Faith Militant are more than just King's Landing. Granted, it would be a decapitation strike, but I think people just wanted to believe, in season 7 there'll be repercussions, and then there weren't. What if Cersei really does blow up the Great Sept with wildfire, or something like that? Won't there be a lot of Fallout chapters from doing that? That he is taking the time to handle that the TV show didn't. If you're complaining, well, there should have been more Fallout to this, you can't complain. Then why is it taking Martin so much time to write those Fallout chapters that the TV show didn't even cover? It takes time. So think about that. He didn't say, I'm struggling with Daenerys chapters or Tyrion chapters or Jon Snow chapters. He is very specifically struggling with Cersei chapters, which he finished, and now he's writing Jaime and Brienne ones, which probably involve Lady Stoneheart and which may overlap with Cersei. The mind boggles at what exactly could be going on there. This is the most detail we've had in a long time. So I know I've been doing a full hour podcasting. We're going to set this audio only so you can just listen to it in the background. It's easier when it's a longer thing like this. But there's a lot to unpack from that, from what's going on with House of the Dragon, with it. They're fleshing out an outline. Obviously, things will be different. I hope it's the story he would have written. And, he's doing it in collaboration with other people. I hope this is the book we never got, because we only got an outline. And, sources always contradict. And this is really substantial Winds of Winter news in terms of, well, what exactly are you writing about specifically you've been fixating on? This raises a lot of questions about the changing needs of adaptation and what exactly he's doing in Winds of Winter, so please share your thoughts in the comments below. Not just, he's not writing fast. Please, specific theories in the comments about what you think he's agonizing over. Specifically, even if you don't agree with him, what do you specifically think he's agonizing over in the storyline? Be constructive, guys. So for more analysis like this, of course, please like and subscribe. Most importantly, I look forward to your comments of just trying to work out through discussion what exactly is going on with this, both with Winds of Winter and with the changing needs of adaptation in House of the Dragon, that they will need to pick one objective version of events.